Well, this came sooner than I thought. It hasn't even been a month since I put out my Undertale 2 prediction video, and Deltarune just dropped on us. Honestly, the thought of diving into this game gave me shivers, since the majority of you first tuned to my channel for my Undertale analysis videos. I'll always be grateful for that. But with Deltarune, I had to seriously dive back into the Undertale lore that we covered almost 3 years ago, and there's quite a lot to go over. First and foremost, go play the game if you haven't already. It's incredibly important that you get a taste for the story and adventure yourself, before spoiling it all. So consider this your warning. For those still around, we've covered tons of mysteries in the past. From Sans possibly being a human, to the darkness behind Kara, and of course, the Lost Doctor, W.D. Gaster. And now that we have an extension to the Undertale universe, there's quite a lot to string together. So buckle up folks, because it's going to be a doozy. So before talking about the absolute intro to the game, we're going to talk about the adventure itself. The thing about Deltarune is that it's immediately difficult to tell at what point the game takes place in a timeline sense. Our main character starts in Toriel's house, as if things progress normally at the end of Undertale. Frisk looks like they've gotten older, and it also looks like they've adopted the color palette of Kara. That is, unless we actually are Kara. Despite these two former names, Toriel calls us Chris, so that's our new name I suppose. Now mind you, this is me framing the story from knowing nothing at the beginning. At this point, it was hard to discern whether this was a sequel or a prequel. Was this a continuation of Frisk's story? Azrael seems to be alive and well, and Toriel is of course our mom. When we dive into school though, we see familiar characters like Undyne, who is now a police officer. So this immediately made me think, okay, this takes place in the future. Once monsters moved to the surface, they integrated with society, and all is well. Because if this wasn't the case, then no human would have ever had to fall into the underground. Thus Toriel wouldn't be our mother. Except that's not really the case. Shortly after arriving at school, we notice it's a monster-only school. No humans are there besides ourselves. Alphys appears to be a teacher there, and Toriel apparently works there as well. And this is all we have to go off of before our adventure begins. This is where I want to break, to talk about what we'll be covering next. In this video, we're going to be covering 3 things. When this takes place in the Undertale timeline, how what occurs to us is super fitting for the story, and who is the mastermind behind everything we're experiencing. Let's tackle point 2 first, because the first question relies on parts of the second. Upon encountering Susie, soon after we get to the school, our characters fall into a deep pit and wake up in a mysterious land. Adorned with different outfits, Susie and Chris wander through the darkness trying to find a way out. Soon after being attacked, they discover a town and a prince who rules the Kingdom of Darkness. This prince explains the legend of the Deltarune, and how our characters are a part of the prophecy. Now, this story will probably seem strangely familiar to you, as will tons of things in this game. Light and darkness have lived in balance for quite some time, and if that balance is broken, the world will fall to shambles. This parallels Undertale's story nicely in regards to monsters and humans, but the similarities certainly don't stop there. Obviously, our cloaked figure looks like the river person. Immediately after this, they get hit by a character that strongly resembles Sans, from his overall humorous nature to his recurring failed traps. But this is why all this is weird, because these uncanny examples are only the start. The whole adventure feels like deja vu, from the way certain rooms are shaped to similar sprites being repurposed. Let's go over a few, shall we? First off, the path outside the shop is almost identical to the one in Undertale. The path to the castle feels familiar. The elevator situation within the castle feels familiar. Regardless of where you are in this entire storyline, series of environments, etc., all feel super close to what came before it. Almost like this is a bizarre world of Undertale. Which might sound silly, but I think there might even be more to it than that. Consider this for a moment. Those of you who have played Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask probably had a similar feeling. Link falls down a big hole, lands in a world full of characters that he should know but doesn't, and carries out a mysterious adventure where we don't really know what's real or what's not. And that's what Deltarune is for Undertale. From the environment to the characters, it legitly feels like a Halloween hack of Undertale. Maybe that's just Toby having a fun throwback to some of his earliest work, but it seemed like something noteworthy to include. The weird thing about all of this, though, is how it all concludes. We go through this winding world that parallels our past adventure. but the bonds we form in this time frame are severed. We reach the end, and we find out that the prince we've been traveling with actually looks just like Azrael. His personality is spot on too, so one could even assume it is Azrael, or at least it is supposed to represent him in this world. After our time with the fountain, which is very similar to the barrier in Undertale, we're transported back to the quote-unquote real world. And it's like we just woke up from a dream. The Deltarune world was like the Wizard of Oz equivalent to Undertale, and we were left wondering if it was real or if it was all just a dream. However, both of our characters remembered that it happened, so something definitely did occur. So why is this super fitting for the story? Well, first and foremost, like I said before, it's sort of like a throwback to the Halloween hack of yesteryear. Even Toriel's computer is set to the Halloween wallpaper of you and Azrael from 8 years ago. Then there's also the fact that it was released on Halloween, but more so it's fitting given what we know about Undertale timelines. If we recall Sans' fight from Undertale, he specifically states, "Our reports showed a massive anomaly in the time-space continuum. Timelines jumping left and right, stopping and starting." He talks about how much of an emotional burden it is knowing that everything will be reset one day. Remember, in the realm of the game, he was aware he was within one. He knows it's a repeating story. In Undertale, we traverse the same timeline over and over again, exploring every inch it had to offer. But in Deltarune, we're traversing across different timelines. Timelines that feel so similar to our story, but are bizarre enough to be separate. So if we know we're traversing across two different timelines, where does the actual timeline take place? Because when we start Deltarune, we're on a timeline that's related to Undertale. When we leave that timeline, we journey through another one, only to arrive back at the timeline we started on. But are we before or after Undertale? Well, judging by the responses in town, things are only that much more confusing. So let's outline the plot points of the current timeline to show what exists and what doesn't exist where we are. Starting off, Gerson is dead. His gravestone, among others, can be found in the graveyard, and a book he wrote is found in the library. This points to after Undertale. Undyne is a police officer now though, but she doesn't know who Alphys is. This means that technically this can't be after Undertale's true ending. She should rightfully know who she is since she loves her. But things get weirder. Asgore is still around and owns a flower shop, but Toriel and him are still divorced, despite their children still being alive. The lion-like monster was encouraged enough to be who they are, despite Mettaton's body never existing. Mettaton's transformation was something they admired, and it gave them hope. But Mettaton is still a ghost, and lives in the town in this timeline. The fire elemental in the shop says that a fire elemental would be horrible for serving drinks, which basically hints that Grillby's never existed. Bratty and Catty hate each other. Burger Pants recognizes you, but doesn't seem to have ever worked at the MTT resort, mainly because it never existed, since Mettaton didn't exist. And if Chris exists, that means he had to have been introduced to the monsters in a way that would make him the only human around. Because, according to people around town like the apartment NPC, they are the only human. But humans and monsters would only be separate if a war happened. So where are the other humans? Asgore's kids are alive, thus he never declared war, and Toriel shouldn't have left him. So what gives? All in all, there are conflicting points of logic that show our existing timeline can't take place before or after the true Undertale timeline. Everyone is alive, so it isn't after the genocide route either. The truth is, the timeline we exist on is parallel to the Undertale timeline. It has to be an alternative reality, where certain events happened and others did not. Certain character relationships exist and others don't. An alternate universe to the story we became comfortable with within the first game. But now we've come down to the last part of this whole ordeal, the why. What is going on and how is all this happening? For those who have followed along on Twitter, you know we've been getting hit with a slew of odd messages. Messages from an old friend who never had much to say in the past. The whole Twitter is redacted and blacked out, so that should point you in the direction of who is speaking. The messages read as follows. Welcome. Have you been looking for me? How wonderful. I've been looking for you as well. I have something. Something I want to show you. Something I think you will find very, very interesting. But it is far from complete. Thus, I have a small favor to ask of you. Return here in 24 hours. At that time, I will ask you a few questions. Then, using your responses, we will approach its realization. thank you very much for your time. I will be in contact again soon. With the game's release, we have a few more as well. Thank you for waiting so long. After all, you and I, we have both been waiting for such a very long time. So to be here, finally, on the verge of connection, is quite exciting. I look forward to creating a new future with you. Now, show yourself, Deltarune. This is WD Gaster. Undertale on Switch hinted that his return would be coming, but how quick it was really surprised me. But he's not the only one to make a return either, because at the end of the game, Kara enters the fray in a shocking ending sequence. But how do these two figures rule over everything we see within Deltarune? Every choice we make, what we perceive as reality, and ultimately the fate of everyone around us? Well, that's going to have to wait until next time. I know people generally hate two-parters, but there's a lot to parallel between Undertale and Deltarune about why this subworld of Deltarune exists. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you can watch the video as soon as it comes out. How does the opening sequence to the game fit into the story? There's a secret under this town, a voice calling out into the woods that is waiting to be heard. Next time, we'll be piecing it all together. And with that, thanks for tuning into this Undertale revival. It's been a few years, but I'm excited to pick up my Undertale lore notes and dive right back in. That, and I still gotta conclude what's happening in Bendy and the Ink Machine. Lots to do. But thanks for watching, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.